Every revolution, no matter how electrifying at its birth, eventually skids into a strange echoing silence. At first there's thunder, banners in the streets, megaphones crackling, crowds chanting down the avenue, certain the future has finally answered their call. Then, almost overnight, the cheers fade and the marble corridors of power in state houses across the continent pretend they can't hear the pounding outside their windows. This hush is not accidental, it's choreography, and Africa has felt this manufactured quiet before. Thomas Sankara faced that silence in 1987, Muammar Gaddafi faced it in 2011, and the script was perfected. A guitar-strumming paratrooper, Thomas Sankara, had spent 4 blazing years turning Upper Volta into Burkina Faso. He slashed ministerial limousines, planted 10 million trees, and told the IMF to keep its poisoned gifts. But as soon as he demanded that African leaders reject foreign debt in one unified voice, the applause in continental governments stopped. Weeks later, the guns spoke instead. Sankara was shot down in a courtyard and the world quickly turned the page. Flamboyant but unbending on African sovereignty, Muammar Gaddafi had bankrolled the African Union and dreamed of a continental gold-backed dinar to replace the US dollar. Yet, when NATO jets swooshed over Libya's territory, many of the same leaders who had pocketed his oil-funded generosity, African presidents cleared their throats, zipped their mouths, and looked away. More than a decade of civil war followed, and northbound refugees were left to negotiate the Mediterranean waves alone. And now, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest head of state on earth, feels that same engineered silence breathing down his neck. In less than 2 years, his expelled French troops raised gold royalties and formed the Alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger. Traoré talks sovereignty the way others recite football scores, daily, casually, as if it were obvious. And once again, among African leaders, the applause has faded to a nervous cough. And the empire calls him a junta leader, military captain, Putin proxy, and terrorist enabler. That was expected. But what hurts, or should hurt, across the continent is this other silence. No thunderous statements from ECOWAS, no urgent AU summits on French neocolonialism, no pan-African chorus of presidents saying, "We got you, Captain." Instead, corridors echo and cameras swivel elsewhere. Across the continent, the usual chorus of presidential condolences, congratulatory messages on re-elections, and press releases is conspicuously thin. State broadcasters from Lagos to Nairobi allot Traoré 15 quiet seconds, wedged between weather and sport, before moving on to more comfortable headlines. Silence has a sound if you listen closely. It's the closing of a presidential door when reporters ask, "Do you support Burkina Faso's right to sovereignty?" It's the hush of men who'd rather a nation stay broken than see their balance sheets disrupted. Traoré, like Sankara before him, now faces 2 soundtracks: a deafening grassroots chorus and an elite silence thick as fog. Which tune will shape the continent's future depends on whether everyday Africans keep cheering and whether their leaders finally join the chorus. So today we pull back the curtain and ask, why? Why does Africa's diplomatic class ghost the man who dared to echo Sankara's unfinished sentences? Why are Africa leaders so quiet while the people are louder than ever?
I stand firmly with Ibrahim Traoré. If they dare touch Ibrahim Traoré, they will regret.
If revolutions are powered by hope, then counter-revolutions are financed by spreadsheets. Every time an African leader vows to reclaim sovereignty, an invisible abacus begins to rattle. Foreign debt coupons coming soon, donor stipends are scheduled for release, and the quieter the politician becomes, the smoother those numbers align. In the Sahel, Captain Traoré's thunderclap has forced that hidden arithmetic into the open. Why, the streets ask, can African presidents recite Sankara in campaign season but whisper like librarians once elected? The answer lives in these 3 interlocking systems: debt diplomacy, base dependency, and the narrative industry. All these together enforce the silence. In Ouagadougou's treasury, the monthly balance sheet resembles a hostage note. Burkina Faso's public debt sits near 56% of GDP, moderate by Eurozone standards, but lethal when your currency isn't backed by a printing press. Each quarter, repayment schedules for Eurobonds and concessional loans arrive like ticking clocks. 75 million US dollars here, 120 million US dollars there. Default is an option only if you fancy scorched earth credit ratings and frozen access to medicine imports. Now, scale that across the continent. African governments collectively owe roughly 1.1 trillion US dollars. More than half of African Union members spend more on interest payments than on health. One single late payment and Europe's bond traders downgrade you, raising borrowing costs for schools, roads and election promises. Into this fragile arithmetic steps the IMF with its Article 4 health check. Any whiff of political instability, such as a coup leader praised or a foreign base expelled, triggers the phrase heightened risk. Sliced into Wall Street screens, interest rates climb, budgets constrict, social subsidies vanish. Therefore, silence becomes collateral. Want a fresh loan to stabilize fuel prices? Best avoid endorsing Traore's revolt. Need your poverty reduction stipend released before election season? Maybe postpone that speech criticizing French military footprints. Debt isn't merely numbers, it is the language of obedience, enforced not by bayonets but by Bloomberg terminals. Spin a globe and stick pins where foreign soldiers are based on African soil. Djibouti has turned itself into a global military hotspot, renting out land to the US, China, France, the UAE, Italy, Saudi Arabia and Japan. Niger, before its coup, fielded American Reaper drones while French Mirage jets flew overhead. Senegal houses a French logistics hub built into its new international airport terminal. These bases arrive with checks, counter-terror stipends, training funds and aid. For cash-strapped armies battling jihadists, rejecting such support is like refusing a lifeboat because the rope looks suspicious. Training missions also serve as elite bodyguard programs. Special forces guard not just borders but friendly governments. When Traoré expelled France's Sabre detachment, observers predicted immediate military collapse. Instead, Burkina Faso diversified. Drones from Turkey and Russia and promises of Chinese radar systems. But most African leaders see that balancing act as tightrope acrobatics above a pit of IMF sharks and prefer the comfort of French or American brutes, however heavy. So they speak softly, if at all. What's worse, to condemn Traoré openly risks angering their own populations. To praise him, on the other hand, risks losing their security umbrella. Passiveness wins and silence reigns. A third layer of quiet is manufactured by the NGO media complex. Think tanks issue governance indices, NGOs publish annual freedom scorecards, and major outlets quote them without interrogating funding sources. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty have exposed genuine horrors in the past, yes. But critics note how their spotlight tilts depending on who is on stage. Nations challenging Western interests often suffer full beam scrutiny, while allies with equally troubling records slip beneath softer light. African presidents schooled in PR survival know the game. Quote the right NGOs, speak the democracy script, host a US training exercise, and the rating agencies will call you reform-minded, unlocking billions. Laud Traoré too loudly and watch your index score fall like a defective elevator. Silence is also about towing the mining code line. Traoré's royalty hike on its gold mines and gold exports reverberates in boardrooms from Malawi to Ghana, where executives enjoy quiet dividends from similar arrangements, a bare 3% of royalties, tax holidays, and environmental exemptions. If Traoré strikes a new precedent, say 15 to 30% on royalties, other African nations may face voters demanding the same. Let's face it, some presidents who rose from liberation struggles now preside over raw material kingdoms stitched into global supply chains like diamonds, oil, and even tea and cocoa. Raising taxes and royalties on foreign farms might excite the masses, but it rattles donors, mining lobbies, and the gated communities where cabinet ministers spend weekends. Better to praise Burkina's courage in private, toast diplomatic cocktails in public, and hope the revolution stops before shareholders notice. Article 4G of the AU Constitutive Act preaches non-interference. Yet since 2020, Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso and Niger were swiftly suspended after coups, each time under pressure from ECOWAS and EU funders. By the way, a whopping 42% of AU's program budget is underwritten by the European Union. Therefore, you see, silence becomes institutional policy, cloaked in diplomatic phrasing like "we encourage dialogues" or "we monitor the situation," or better yet, "we urge rapid return to constitutional order." Translation: we recognize the anger on the streets, but mustn't offend the donors upstairs. A Burkinabe proverb says, "The tree is heard when it falls, but the forest grows in silence."
Guys, I bring you greetings from Kenya.
Empire nurtures the forest of influence the same way, quietly, root by root, debt agreements here, training missions there, and think tank awards on shiny stages. Traore's challenge is to make that hidden forest visible, to shout its mechanisms into daylight. From space, the Sahel is a sand-colored ribbon stretching 5,900 kilometers or 3,670 miles long, a strip wide enough to swallow 6 Frances, or France plus Germany plus Spain plus Italy plus the UK plus Portugal plus the Netherlands, with a little room still left over. It receives just about 600 millimeters of rain a year, but hides 30% of the world's unmined uranium, a tenth of Africa's proven gold, and the planet's largest untapped onshore wind corridor. It straddles 11 countries, 90 ethnic groups, and 2 time zones, and every truck route that links the Atlantic to the Red Sea must cross its baked laterite. It's too wide to fence, too harsh to do agriculture without ingenuity, and as it turns out, too strategic for any great power to ignore. Beneath its crust lie uranium for Europe's reactors, gold for bullion desks in Dubai, manganese for China's steel, and untapped lithium that Wall Street forecasts into every future EV battery. Above ground, supply corridors zigzag the region, pipelines, fiber optic trunks, and what military planners call lines of communication. Whoever holds the Sahel shapes the arteries of multiple continents. Captain Ibrahim Traoré knows this. So do France, the United States, Russia, China, Turkey, and the Gulf monarchies. Each paints the board in its own color, claiming moral purpose. But scrape away the slogans, counterterrorism, development, partnership, and an older motive shines through. Keep the tap running, keep the corridor open, keep the flag visible. France still wants uranium and a CFA franc it can veto. Washington wants runways for its Reaper drones. Russia trades mercenaries for gold stakes. China flashes hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure loans, but asks to be repaid in rail rights, port fees, or political partnership. Every president who applauds Traoré risks annoying at least one of these giants, and the loans, bases, and trade preferences that keep domestic budgets afloat. Whether inexcusable or not is why state houses stay quieter than the streets. Revolutions echo loudest in the streets, but they live or die in the hush of presidential suites. Sankara's mic was cut, Gaddafi was drowned in NATO's roar, and now almost every African palace has turned the volume knob to 0 on Captain Traoré. Yet here's the twist history loves. Silence amplifies whatever refuses to shut up. Phones buzz, hashtags ricochet, gold audits leak, and ordinary Africans quote sovereignty like scripture. The leaders may be mute, but the continent is anything but. So the next time you scroll past a quiet press release, remember what's missing from the sentence. Ask who benefits when the corridors stay silent, and who loses if that silence finally breaks. In Burkina Faso's dusty towns, villagers tune battered radios to community FM stations, relaying diaspora podcasts about fair trade Traore has instituted. A grandmother who never touched a touchscreen repeats a slogan she heard from her grandson's phone. To be fair, the hash isn't absolute. Guinea-Conakry flat out refused to enforce ECOWAS sanctions when they were issued, and Bangui, the Central African Republic, even sent a ceremonial unit to march in Burkina Faso's Independence Day parade. Still, 2 supportive capitals out of 54 only make the continental silence feel deeper. But whether you live in Ouagadougou or Ottawa, Lagos or London, your phone already buzzes with the aftershock of Sahel's gumbo. The only question left is how you will answer. Because the question was never why leaders are mute on Traore. The real question, the one this video leaves ringing in your ears, is how long their silence can outshout a people who have found their voice.